the fact that Abraham Lincoln was 6'4".
All right. All right. Well, we're not sure what happened to Tammy. I guess take a quick look for her. But we're gonna go live anyways. Well, apparently we probably are. So, hello everybody. All right. Well, I'll get you a link here first in the chat if anyone wants to put it out there. And there we go. It's live. Hello, people.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello there.
Okay. Well, I guess while we're waiting for Tammy, let's run around and oh, there she is. She's trying to get it. I have to let her in. My bad. That's probably my fault. We're old here, folks. You know, we working with this technology stuffy. Oh, Tammy, try again.
Hello.
Yay!
There we got you.
Welcome to the
All
experience.
right. Well,
I ran a computer before. What's going on?
not much. It's getting going. Alan, you want the link? There's your link to throw out there.
Oh yeah, I
And,
already shared it.
Wow, you're freaking quick, aren't you? All right.
This.
All right. Well, let's might as well go around the freaking table here and everyone introduce yourselves. I guess tell people where you work and basically anything else you want to go with. Alan, you might as well go first, brother.
All right, thanks. Yeah, Alan Bleiweiss. I call myself a forensic SEO audit specialist. The reality is, it's not the same kind of practice as happens in a morgue. I don't go that granular or looking for things. However, I look for those things that I believe are going to be the most important issues that a site it needs to deal with and address. And it's based on sustainable success, not figuring out the cause of death and leaving it.
All right, Tammy, give us your hello and where you work and what you do.
It's me. Tammy Wood. I work at Automation Anywhere, which is a robotic process automation company, which is really, really super cool as it applies to SEO, by the way. I call it Python 2.0, just because it's easier than Python. What do I do? Technical SEO? I don't know.
Yeah.
Internet stuff. You know.
Internet. That's what I always go with. I do
internet stuff.
Internet stuff. That's what I do.
I like in meetings at stand-ups. They're like, Tammy, what are you going to work on today? And I'm like, I don't know, some SEO. I don't know what I'm going to do. You never know what you're going to find, right?
Mr. Doc.
Hey, Doc Sheldon here, Intrinsic Value SEO, and I focus on technical SEO stuff, especially around WordPress sites. But I do site audits and dabble in some forensic stuff.
And I guess Terry, you're a semi-retired king of the conferences. What's your bio look like these days, man?
I don't know. I guess I can say my job is your sidekick.
Oh, oh boy. Well, that can't be good.
And I'm working on some other things, which, they'll become more clear in the near future.
All right, guys. So this all started, I guess, for any of us audit folks that are doing a lot of it over the last couple of years. It seems, I don't know if there's less link spamming or what the hell is going on, but audits seem to be coming on the rise and people talked about them more, which at first I thought was a good thing, but apparently not, because now there's all these, low-level guys giving them free as loss leader or $200 audits and crap like that are probably just plugging in a tool and sending out a PDF. But it just kind of got me motivated to do this. So we're split it up into two parts, folks. This week's kind of the business side of audits. Next week will be the nuts and bolts. So I guess we might as well start it right at the beginning, which is, I guess, the sales process of an audit, I guess, and how one deals with you know, when you get an inquiry, like how are you addressing it? Like, what do you dig into first? Do you have like a RFP kind of thing? Do you have a form, or is there a set bunch of questions that you ask? How do you approach things after the initial contact? So let's get right into that. We'll start right there. Alan's grinning away, so we'll go with you first, Alan.
Yeah, as soon as you say RFP, I shiver and quake and run away. The only time I ever participated in an RFP is if it's through an agency client that has an opportunity that they were approached or they found a pitch moment, and where they write 98.9% of the RFP responses. Because for me personally, RFPs are an archaic dinosaur method of determining who to rely on, especially in our industry. Yeah, I'm willing to participate in terms of the notion that they're doing the heavy lifting for that aspect of the sales sequence, because they bring me in specifically to do the actual audit work itself, right? I'm the heavy hitter when it comes to the actual audit. They provide support to that, and their role is more about what they can do as an agency in the aftermath of the audit, during the implementation, and beyond. For me, it's a matter of I get that first email or I get a direct message in Facebook or on Twitter, and I immediately go to the website and I start poking around and I make a few notes about things I find immediately. I've never once had a case, in a typical audit anyway, for me, where I couldn't find at least a few things that could be very serious issues, right? Just in the first few minutes. Sometimes there's special cases where it's like, we have this issue and it's a non-standard issue, but most of the time it's, we just need an audit for whatever reason. I then respond back in an email saying, hey, look, I took a quick look at your site. Here's the first few things I found that I think might be really impactful. However, I can't know more until I do a full audit. I need to do a proper audit to see what's really going on across the board.
Now, does the question at that point become, can you afford me, or do they already know what they're getting into?
Yeah, no, they come to me, almost always, they come to me already knowing what to expect price-wise. I have a price page on my site, or they've been introduced from somebody else, or, we've done business in the past. And that helps a lot, because a lot of people think they want an audit, but they either can't afford my rates, or they think that they shouldn't have to pay that much. And I'd rather not have to interact with them if that's their position, right? Or in an ideal scenario, I might say, hey, look, I understand that you might not be able to afford my rates. Here's some others I trust that might be able to do it at a lower rate in your need scenario, right? And I have a pre-canned template with the 8 or other 10 things I want to communicate in that sales sequence about what's included, what's not included, what to expect, what the general timeline is for deliverables, what the process looks like, what they're going to get, right? So, and it's all in that template, so I don't have to rewrite that every time. I send that off, and 90% of the time, when a client ends up becoming a client, that's literally all that I need. They immediately come back saying, let's start.
All right, Doc, I know you're kind of in my position where you get them from all over the scope, from corporate to smaller businesses. So what is your initial, sales process look like when you get an inquiry?
Well, most of my business comes from either referrals or returns. So a lot of times I'm relieved of the need for a lot of sell. But like Alan, I actually did get sent an RFP, and I took a look at a 7-page RFP for a site that had about 1,200 pages. And I'm sorry, I took a look through this thing. I just no-bid it, because it was obviously drafted by people that didn't have any clue what SEO is, or what can be done, or what has impact. And I didn't want to go there. So much like for an organic job, I have a document I send out with questions, but I don't do that for an audit. You know, a lot of times when I perform an audit, if it's going to be an ongoing client, actually doing the audit is going to answer most of those questions for me. If I have any remaining questions, it's going to be things like their ideal customer or pain points, that sort of thing. So, you know, I don't really send out any sort of an entry form. I do the audit, and that's going to tell me most of what I need to know. And since I'm not normally, for instance, if it's an organic task after the audit, I usually have Steve do that because I'm trying to stay away from that stuff and strictly focus on the technical. So I simply send him my audit. Here's what I found, and he knows where to go from there. And he'll always have some specific questions, but since I don't go chasing links, and I don't worry about rankings per se. I just worry about getting the site into a mode where it can achieve some rankings without stumbling over its own feet.
Bill, do you get involved in the sales process, or are you kind of after the fact?
I do sometimes get involved in the sales process. I get asked to look at sites that we're anticipating possibly working with. As Alan said, sometimes reviewing the site and taking a look and seeing if there are things that are potentially problems can often reveal something needs to be fixed and needs help with. And sometimes people have an idea of what might be wrong with their site and put that out there, saying this is potentially a problem or so on. And so having some case studies that can be shared with people that gives them an idea of what we've tackled in the past can sometimes give them an idea of whether or not they want to work with us.
Tammy, yourself, do you get involved in the sales process on your end?
No, not anymore. But
That's it. She's done. Just
You're
dropped the-
lucky. No client management.
no,
That's why I left the
I've done it.
business.
Yeah. It's hard. It's the most difficult, right? I think in the scenario where you find they've already done, just like you said, the plug and play website audit, and they've got a PDF that says, oh, you have 2 H1 tags on 300 URLs, and you have to sit there and go, all right, so we're going to address that first. That's your big priority. So it's hard. It's very, very difficult to justify the level of technical audits that we provide, all of us here specifically, against something like that. And so luckily, no, I'm not.
Does anybody get into like the goals of the audit as you're going through the process or whatever, as far as, you know, what is the client looking to get out of it? I think, Alan, you were starting to move in towards managing client expectations and stuff. Yeah. So I think at some point I find myself, at least when I'm selling or going through that process, or even on the onboarding after the sale or whatever, is figuring out what they see in their mind as what's going to come from it, or what the goal of that audit is to them. So
yeah, I have some of that take place in those first email exchanges, just to get a general foundation, to make sure we're on the same page, that this is something that I can provide a value to. And to make sure that they're not thinking I'm going to offer them something that I don't believe is valid, right? However, it's not until the contract is signed that I send them an actual intake form where I've got several pages of questions that I ask. And it starts out with, all right, what's your main goal? What's your big picture desire here, hope, need? And then I end it after all the other questions about what I need to get from them. Give me some specific things that you're looking to get answers on, right? And in my reading of the intake form, if I think we need to establish a clearer expectation platform or foundation, before I even get into the work, I reach out to them and say, hey, let's talk about this, right? Because I want to make sure before I spend hours of work or send it to my assistant that we're on the same page with those things. That's so important. And that's where I do that. That's the intake sequence after they sign contract and get me the deposit.
Hey, Dave, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, man.
been talking about the, as they call them, the type of cheaper audits. I did a lot of those in the past. I could do one for $300, no problem. But I didn't spend 10 hours doing it. I
Yeah.
spent about 3 hours doing it. But if you take Screaming Frog, it'll show you most of the errors on a website. So I give them the error file and say, here's the pages that have bad titles. Here are the pages that the response codes are wrong, or you may want to do something about it. That's all they get. They don't get recommendations on how to actually fix it. Then you're talking thousands because, you know, lots of knowledge.
Yeah, I did the same sort of thing. I had a couple clients come to me a few years back. They said, we were told we need a site audit. And I looked and I didn't find anything that was really a big bang for the buck type task. So I started offering a $300, that 30,000 foot view to see if a site audit is really even warranted.
Warranted. Right.
But that's like you. I don't give them any recommendations. I say, okay, I see that your images need serious work. So I don't think a full audit is really called for. And then I may price something depending upon what I find.
I don't have the $300 version, but I have, like you, I have the 40,000 foot view. I have a limited audit and I have a comprehensive, and the limited's usually $1,000 and whatever. But that's just, again, 40,000 foot view saying this should be looked at deeper, this area, let's dig in deeper to these, and then they can move on from there. Because you got some mom and pops and people like that can't afford to go to like $5,000 or $4,000 or whatever. So you got to start somewhere. And so that I do certainly do that kind of stuff.
I just would include a Screaming Frog, do a check on Webmaster Tools for anything that is glaringly wrong. Download the links from Webmaster Tools that they'll give you and do a quick look at those. That I would charge $1 per URL reviewed.
Bill, I know you and I have talked about the onboarding stuff before, and I know you definitely get involved in that area. So what are some of the stuff you work towards as far as, I guess, setting goals of the process, managing expectations and things like that? Because I know we've talked about that before.
So making a good first impression on people is important, and asking them questions that show that you actually care about what you're doing and you want to help them. Ask them what's important, what things are they puzzled by, concerned about, what things might they want have changed. Like we had one client who had a knowledge panel showing up to their site, showing their service department rather than their car dealership. And they want to sell more cars. That's what their presence on the web is for. So they didn't want lots of people showing up at the service department fixing catalytic converters. They wanted to sell more Hondas. So we worked with them to get that knowledge panel fixed in addition to doing the audit. But we wanted to know, what things do you want changed? What do you want better? And that made them feel a lot better about working with us.
Yeah, I think with anything in sales with SEO is have that relationship where they have faith in you and you have a belief that they're going to implement what you're doing is important. Yeah. I remember, Alan, you and I used to have the joke, 10% implementation, 100% of the blame. So yeah, it's always a classic. Okay, Brian Harnish is in the chat. We got a whole bunch of questions in the YouTube chat. And he was asking how we deal with client objections. I'll start. I just tell them to go away. Anybody else? Like, sorry, Brian, but really, like, I've had people tell me that my timeline's too long if it's 3 weeks, or that it's too expensive. And when I get those objections, I know what it's going to take and what I need to make. And so generally speaking, I just don't do it. I don't know. How do you guys deal with client objections? I know that's a normal sales thing. I tend to generally just go by.
So part of the job is education, client education. And sometimes they'll try to learn by looking at what the competitors are doing. So when they see a competitor who has carefully categorized their XML sitemaps, and they say, is this something we should do? Is this helping them with ranking boosts? And say, no way in the world. They just read that as a text file and they check to see if those URLs exist. and index them, but it has nothing to do with how those are ranked.
Well, and I guess on that line, Bill, that again, those of us not at big fancy agencies, uh, will deal with some mom and pops, and you're going to get situations where you got potential clients that aren't that savvy about SEO. So I guess to your point, that educating them during the process probably becomes important too, as far as, again, when you've got these guys running around doing loss leader free audits that they're pumping out of SEM Rush or something, educating them or like you're saying, giving them a sense of what this actually involves. And with, again, you got a mom and pop business, it's going to be totally different.
Yeah, I sent a questionnaire to a mom and pop business that asked for stuff that you might put in a business model when you're building that. And the guy who owned the shop said, I've never answered these questions. Thank you for asking them. Because sometimes that doesn't happen when you're carefully putting together a business quickly and getting online and selling things. Just taking that chance to step back 2 steps and say, okay, this is why we're doing this. This is what's important. This is what we need to show with our website that we aren't showing. Because that gets missed too. And that's an important part of an audit, making sure they don't have those gaps in what they offer.
I do that. I would do that before I switched to in-house. It'd be like, I am on your team. I'm a staff member now. So you give me anybody on your staff that's even slightly interested in what I'm doing, and we're working together to do this. You have to empower them to understand this isn't some magic formula, that cannot be learned or explained or justified. It's really something that can be taught.
And that's funny, Tammy, because every email I send to a client, I always call it our site. You know what I mean? I notice our site or we, or it's always inclusive. You know what I mean? I talk to it like I'm committed to it as part of the team kind of thing. So.
Right, because it's scary. It's a scary thing.
Sorry, Bill.
I've read your page on how the service you provide works. I still don't quite get it. How do I book an appointment? How do I go through it? It doesn't say that. And I think your customers may not quite get that either. So we've helped people with that, rewriting stuff, describing it better, showing better pictures, providing better examples. And the business picked up because of it, which made them happy.
That's how you build trust.
Right. And I think to that point, actually, Ammon's playing along with us in the YouTube chat. And as he's saying, is one size never fits all. So it goes back to that cookie cutter SEO doesn't exist. And the more that you take that personal interest in their business model and in their site and in that process and take some ownership with them on it, the more they sort of trust in you. So.
Yeah. As to empowering people, like Tammy said, when we were doing that, we used to ask to talk to the salespeople, customer service as well, to see if there was gaps in content, etc.
Yeah, and another aspect of being able to address friction in the execution or the implementation for me is paying attention and active listening for pain points that different players have. Right, so yeah, I do work with some smaller site owners. However, I do most of my work is enterprise or Fortune 50 scale, and there's a lot of people with their hands in the pot. So it's being able to understand where those different players have their pain point from their job role in the business organization, and to use the educational path with empathy, right? Being able to understand why they have a pain point in their role in the organization.
So I guess that also, Alan, would speak to deliverables as far as who are you giving it to? Is it the dev team? Is it the marketing director? Who's the person that's going to be assessing the audit before implementation and who's going to be implementing it, etc.? I guess that speaks to that as well, as far as not only how you're presenting and writing it, but how, like you're saying, the painful, who's involved. Because I gotta say, I've been in some meetings with you with audits and stuff, and I remember you running over the dev team. You know, they tried to get a word edgewise, and Al was just like, no, just shut up right now. look at these load times. Look at this stuff. Are you kidding me? You should have heard Alan go. I was like, oh my God, this guy's gonna die. It's like, so, but I remember that meeting that you and I were in with that client together. And see, I think there's also that point to what you're saying as far as who is going to be, who are you delivering to, and who's implementing, et cetera, right?
Yeah, and as far as my energy, my attitude, my tactic is adaptable to the circumstance and the situation, right? The overwhelming majority of the time that I'm doing an audit, I'm a direct report in that process to corporate ownership, to senior vice president, CEO, CFO, right, CTO, head of digital marketing, and I don't believe in there being any real value in trashing another discussion. However, it's important to wake people up sometimes as well, right? And the dev team's often really heavily overloaded with tasking and multiple development sprints over the coming year already planned out, yet they sometimes come into it where they're fixated on one set of understanding that turns out, once we stop them from insisting on being in that belief system, to be able to say, look, here's a different way to look at it, right? And here's why we need to understand the importance of this and why this happens to be more important given these other requirements that we all now face, right? And yeah, I'm brutally honest, it's just the way I am. Truth is, for the most part, clients really appreciate that because I help to cut through the noise and the red tape. And that's what this is about. What can we do to cut through the noise, the red tape, the preconceived, myopic, absolute unwillingness to listen to another viewpoint? And yes, so sometimes it's really painful to some of the people who are recipients. This is a reality.
I remember I just had myself on mute in that meeting giggling. I was like, look at my wife going, oh, geez, Alan's killing this poor guy. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. What I encounter a lot of times is that where I'm encountering the most resistance on those team meetings is from the devs, because those guys they're usually getting 3 different departments within their organization are being sent requirements that are in total juxtaposition to each other. That, we can do this one or we can do that one. You can't do both. And on one occasion, I actually had a dev who was working very hard at staying up on things like privacy compliance and that sort of thing. And he was trying to push back on this stuff. And I was able to align myself with him, and all of a sudden my adversary became an ally. And that's important because it's a whole lot easier to work with a CEO pushing back than it is to work with a dev who's pushing back, because at the end of the day, that dev is normally going to win if you can't find some common ground. The CEO, you can often box in and make him give up.
Yeah, and another issue that happens some of the time with devs is, in fact, the lack of willingness to think outside of their limited experience as a web developer, who doesn't understand usability, who doesn't understand helpfulness from the front end perspective, who doesn't understand that the search engines are their own kind of user, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where I get the most pushback in my work some of the time, is because some developers absolutely refuse to open their mind to another way of looking at it.
Yeah, some do.
Especially programmers.
I can say, luckily, I work at a large enterprise company now, and I'm actually on the dev team. So when I go to my developers, I'm like, hey, it's for SEO, and it goes right to the top. And I think that's what it goes right into action.
Well, and being able to speak their language as well, no, Tammy? Like that they feel you're part of that crew as opposed to adversarial relationship, because you can speak the language.
Absolutely. It was specifically that position, my position even came up under the developer umbrella because my boss, was smart enough to go, no, SEO is right here. This is where it is. It's not demand gen. It's not email. It's not any of that. SEO needs to be at the core of what makes the website run. So it makes a lot of sense. We do have SEO in another department as well, which is, you know, a whole different thing entirely. But I think even now, as technology has evolved, and I know we're all tech SEOs here, so of course we're all going to agree, which is brilliant. But it should be part of the development process right from the very beginning.
I'm a web
only for
developer, so that's my job. So it's got to be technical.
So how important is it for, especially like audit SEOs, to have a fairly good grounding and basis in development, or at least understanding?
109%.
Oh, Alan's shaking the head.
I'm going to disagree.
Okay, here we go.
SEO is the attempt by search engines to emulate human experience. The biggest weakness that a lot of people who come from a tech and dev background have is they only think in terms of tech, in terms of dev, in terms of code. Where they need to be able to expand to be as successful as I want sites to get to is the need to understand marketing, communications, human emotion, empathy. If we can't empathize with that particular market's needs and what they're looking for to solve a problem or to get knowledge, you can have the best tech in the world and be miserable at SEO. Conversely, if you're content focused, if you're English communications focused, if you're interpersonal communications background, if you're marketing background, you can hit a home run every time if you either collaborate with developers who are willing to work with you to solve that algorithmic interpretation of usability, or you have the ability to get the right kind of tools to evaluate for you where the technical issues exist, and where you can then say to your development team, either in-house or
So it further convolutes the point, I guess, that you really need many hats. You need that usability hat. You need a bit of that technical hat. And guys like me and Bill, we kind of think like search engines. You know what I mean? I'm always, you know, because of the patents and things I do, I'm constantly looking at things as if I'm a crawler, if I'm a search engine, if I'm a, you know what I mean? So I always have that kind of in my head as well, other than just code and things of that nature.
Well, I think that kind of plays into what Tammy said earlier. You know, we've got to become a member of the team because there's so much involved anymore. It's really not reasonable for any one person to be able to expect to be expert in all these facets. So you've got to have a coding expert. You got to have a usability expert, accessibility expert, marketing expert, and they have to cooperate. They have to be
so
a
like
team.
You were saying earlier, becoming friends with that dev team. So when you say, here's an issue I have technically, can you tell me how you're going to solve this, or is there a way you can solve this?
And my approach often
want to help you.
My approach with the dev, especially if I've already encountered some resistance, is often to go to him and say, look, here's what I need to accomplish. And here's an idea I had on how it can be done, but maybe you've got a better idea. Or how would you suggest we do this? Because I'm not trying to create work for you either. I'm not trying to create a long-term maintenance issue for you. Because a lot of times what we do it's going to require that every time there's a WordPress update, they're going to have to go in there and hard code something again. That's a stupid approach. And, you know, so I try to let them know that I would like their support and I'm going to try to offer my support. And it usually works, not always. Sometimes you just end up with somebody who's gotten burned and they just like being hard-headed and it's just not going to happen. But it usually works for me. You can build a team spirit if you actually are getting and giving support.
And Bill, like, I don't know how much you're like me or not, but when I'm auditing things, I tend to look at things like a search engine. You know what I mean? It's just my background is partially in information retrieval, so I tend to look for things that might not normally be in some tool that you plug and play.
Making recommendations is partially criticism of how something is being done on the website. And you get the best results by making that criticism constructive, by empowering people to provide to the best of their abilities something that makes it work well for others.
Yeah. Sitting in a meeting and saying whose brain fart was this is not going to make you any friends.
No,
No, but if you ask the
actually,
dev,
that's one of my best tactics. One of my best tactics is to say, who's smoking crack, put it down.
and sometimes devs do have better approaches and ideas that they haven't shared yet.
or they have restrictions or problems that aren't evident to everybody. So I always, Dave can attest to this, I'll try and feel them out as to why they did it that way. And
Yeah.
then say, oh, can I suggest perhaps a better way to do it that'll be more maintainable, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to be right with you from then because they realize you understand what they're doing. And that's important to a dev is
That's the way.
you're taking his situation into account.
Right. You're not just coming at them and saying, you know, I need this. This needs to be done. I don't care how you do it. You get to
Nope.
sit down with them and say, so
Yeah,
tell me
they-
how we can do this. How can I make this recommended? How can I make this happen with your intelligence and my recommendation? And then you open a conversation, and it really does. They'll come to you next time and say, hey, I have this idea, or I noticed this, and you really create a collaboration. We don't have to argue.
If you put out a strategy to improve SEO and you explain why, that really makes a difference. Taking the effort to explain why you're recommending something.
That's
I
important.
want to teach these. I want to reach this specific targeted audience with this web page. We're trying to provide case studies that target different people and different needs of service, and that's
So-
why we want this one page.
So at what point during the audit process would you guys and gals recommend communicating with these people? So is this a deliverable part? Is this a meeting at the end that you would have where the devs come in, or is that something you do at the beginning or in the middle or at a kickoff? At what point do you guys think that people should involve those that'll be implementing or those that are responsible for the site?
Don't make them sit in a sales meeting or you'll pay for it.
Bingo.
Right, yeah,
Yep.
oh, absolutely.
But your deliverable is more than the piece of paper that you hand over to them. It's the conversation.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's the discussion.
Yeah, there's a lot of it comes down to, you know, how big is the organization? A lot of the sites that I do audits for, those are sites that were created by devs, right? So you're in discussion with devs from the moment you do start the sales cycle in that case. In a larger organization, the devs are typically not going to be involved and no, don't involve them in the sales, right? And in those cases, for me, it's the hierarchical communication based on the corporate structure where I'm brought in at what level, right? And
So as opposed to a mom and pop, you probably run into devs early, but a marketing director, you'd run into them later.
yeah, and it's about being able to make sure that the devs are not given or have to deal with any of the discussions around the content work, because that's not dev, right? The design layout, sometimes that's dev because dev does the design. Sometimes you need to have separate discussions with the designers for that. This is why there is no one size fits all with any of this. And just to circle back a little bit with dev communication, yeah, it's really easy because I get a kick out of the fact that I rant and I tell people to put down the crack pipe. The truth is, when it comes to developers, because of my personal past experience in web development and then actually running an entire web dev organization for a number of years, it's saying to them, look, I'm platform agnostic. I'm framework agnostic, right? I'm methodology agnostic as long as we can agree what is the end goal we need to achieve together and what's the most efficient for everybody's needs, right? there might be 15 ways you can execute on the dev side, any one major task or set of tasks. And you know what? You're the dev. That's your area of expertise. That's your domain. I'm not going to give you any pushback on your decisions with that, as long as you're willing to allow me, when it comes up or when it's appropriate, to help have discussions around what's the most efficient for the end goal, and where you might have a particular path you want to take. I might have other past knowledge that might say, if you go that route, there's potential dangers from an SEO perspective. So let's just talk that out, right? Cooperation.
Yeah, I
I
find,
was going to
you know,
say
I do a lot
silence,
of,
silence in this room. Oh my God. Just
I-
before you go, Doc, like I said, Terry, you know, you and I worked together for quite many years, Terry. And I've been in a few meetings with Alan, and we delivered things, and God, the two of you should work together. Those meetings, you could sell tickets. You could sell tickets. I swear to God.
that,
Man,
that should be pay for view stuff there.
whoa, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Doc.
A lot of what I do besides the technical aspect, and of course it kind of overlaps, is either security or privacy compliance. And working with the devs is critical. You know, that is usually the most important individual I have to establish a rapport with. And it's so often I see these guys getting edicts from on high. Somebody, you know, the CTO has said, do this. And sometimes the CTO doesn't even have a clue. He couldn't code his way into a link. But they're getting conflicting direction,
or like you'll get that with the CMO as well, right? Something came up from his head, gets
and when you get upstairs, there's all this finger pointing from one to the other, and guess who it all rolls downhill on? The dev. You know, so establishing a rapport with them is critical to me, because a lot of times if you don't, you end up, even if they end up having to serve an edict, you end up creating more work for them. And they can be, to me, you know, in my experience, they can be my strongest ally, as long as I can establish that rapport early on. You know, there's nothing more satisfying than being in a conference call with the CMO, the CEO, the CTO, the dev, and myself, and everybody is against us, and we win. I eat that up. Because if you can give them good, hard evidence, why, whether it be case studies or directives from some organization, you know, if you can beat them and make them understand that, okay, this dev and this SEO is offering some value. He's keeping you from hurting yourself. The next battle is going to be more easily won.
What is everyone's feelings as far as you know, obviously after you deliver an audit, you're going to have some meeting time, but should SEOs that are listening, watching, that want to do more audit work, book more time in their pricing as far as ongoing support? Meaning after the wrap-up meeting, after you deliver, then you have your wrap-up meeting. Now, how much time should one spend past that? Should that be extra consulting time afterwards? Should that be priced in, meaning for 2 weeks from now, they want you to come back and check on progress, et cetera, et cetera? How does everyone deal with that, and what's your advice?
I think that that's going to depend on your business model and your approach to conveying value for the price that you set. So for me personally, I build in consistently anywhere from 4 to 6 hours of after audit hardcore consulting, just to be able to make sure that everybody who receives this 40 or 80 page document has enough understanding to move forward into the implementation phase, and an entire year of follow-up questions and answers by email at no additional charge, right? For some clients though, if they're paying me $16,000, $20,000 for an audit because it's one of the bigger ones, I might do 8 or 10 hours of that hardcore consulting as part of the package. And then I say, look, some things we're going to need to get granular on, and we won't know what those are going to be or what they're going to look like or how granular we need to get with my involvement until we're there. And I may come to you and say, look, for this particular thing, I think we're going to need another 15 hours of me helping you out. That's going to be a separate billable. right? And so I also offer consulting hour blocks for clients in those
Yeah,
cases.
see, that's what I'll do a lot of as well.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. I'll have usually in the 4 to 5 hour range afterwards for multiple meetings, and after that, during that sales process, I'll explain to them that here's the hourly rate. You can book 5, 10 hours, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. Bill, do you do any ongoing support with stuff afterwards? Like if it's just a strictly audit job, not an ongoing client.
You try to give people a chance during the phone discussion of the audit to ask questions, to get explained to them well. But sometimes people come up with questions after the fact. And your future relationship with people depends on how well you respond to them, to those types of things. So a lot of times we get referrals from clients for other business. And it's a lot easier to make a sale when your customer is selling things for you.
Yeah, I would say when Dave and I did it, we kind of told them we're going to have a look at the review afterwards to make sure that it was done the way we felt it should be done.
Yeah.
And that's built into the price. However, when I went into on my own, I would do it where when I gave a recommendation, I would tell them right then, this is what it's going to cost for me to fix this for you. Or if you don't want that, this is what I'm going to charge you just to keep looking at it until it gets to where I'm satisfied they've met the requirements.
Tammy, what was your process when you were back on your own there? What was your process?
Man, you guys are just gonna laugh at me.
You just love everybody, and so you just kept helping them till the end of time, and you went broke. That's why you're working.
I promise you, 10 years later, I'm still getting emails from clients from a million years ago, and they'll go, "Hey, what about this new schema thing?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well." And the way I look at it, I know, but the way I would look at it was I believed in them and I gave them steps to improve their business and I wanted to be helpful. So if it takes 20 minutes out of my day to answer them or send them some links or something like that, then I would. And I know if any clients are listening now, please don't bombard me. But,
I think Tanya's just sitting here saying send shoes.
Yeah. I was all in and I want them to succeed. Everything that I've touched that's in my resume or portfolio or whatever.
And again, I guess that's situational too, right? Like
Yeah.
I've had some small businesses that I really cared about the person, and it's like, listen, I'll tell you what, I know you can't really, I've seen all your data, so I know how much you make. I know you can't really afford blocks of hours, but don't just, you got a problem, send me an email, I'll answer it. You know what I mean? So I get, it's always situational, definitely.
I do. And I'm even guilty of randomly checking and then sending a quick email like, hey, I just had an idea. Put this here. There you go.
I still do that. Like I've got clients I don't even get paid. I'm not even on retainer anymore, but they've left me in their analytics or their search console, and something will pop up with their amp or something. I'll be sending them an email. Did you notice we got some amp issues over here today? You want to get someone on that? Like I still end up doing that because they come into your inbox and I'll see them and it's like, okay, well, I better make sure someone's on the ball over there.
Yeah, I know it's not. That's probably why I never owned my own digital agency. Probably, more than likely.
Yeah, they get my PayPal bill.
Well, for my part, I build 4 or 5 hours into the original bid for follow-up, but I'm really loose on stuff as long as it's not abusive. If they call me, maybe I've got 5 or 6 hours already into it, and then 6 weeks later somebody calls me looking for some clarification or a piece of advice. I'm usually pretty loose on that. If it's going to take 5 minutes out of my day, because a lot of my business is referrals from former clients or repeats.
So is that just kind of an experience thing, Doc? As far as
marketing, yeah.
No, but isn't it also experience as far as being an SEO to know when someone's on a fishing trip to get free information or?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
forget that.
Aren't you kind of juggling? You got to have that experience to know that, okay, this person's taking too much, or when do you draw that line? I guess.
I don't take people on fishing trips, and I see that they're going to get cut off cold real quick because I'm
Yeah,
not
I've
going to
had
play that game.
situations like that too. You know what I mean? And I'll give and give, and
Sure.
there's a certain point you guys got to go. Listen, if I, keep having these Skype calls or emails, I'm gonna have to start billing you. Like, there is a
Yeah.
point. There's a cutoff point.
And that's why I put in my contract, I say, in addition to these hardcore hours after audit deliverable, you can send me questions for an entire year. Just be reasonable with the volume and frequency. And I don't track. It's literally, I'm not like, oh my God, okay, so they sent me
Yeah,
70.
it's not like they read something Barry Schwartz posted today and went, "Hey, what is this? What's going on here? I read this on Search Engine Journal." Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that's what most of it is.
But I also, from time to time, I also have cases where it's like 3 years after I did my audit, a client will come back and say, hey, do we have any hours left from the audit? And I'm like,
No.
Dude, you posted that on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, did you? Yeah, I remember that. It was like they came back. I don't even remember. What are you talking about? No.
I was a headbanger there.
a client from 2016 wanted to know if there was any hours left from the audit follow-up, that hardcore 4 or 6 hours original. I'm like, yeah, I don't keep track of that. So honestly, you know what? I don't know. What do you need, right? And they're like, well, we're just finally implementing what you recommended. 3 years later, 4 years later, you take a look to make sure we did it right. And I'm like, no.
I've had the opposite. A rather large insurance company in the UK. Their head of SEO was somebody that was in the dojo, whatever, and so he had me do an audit. And a couple years later, he says, "Well, I'm leaving the company, but so and so's coming in to take over my job," which was someone else that we knew in the industry. And so he says, "Well, can you run another audit for us?" I'm like, "Fine." So I didn't look at the past one, right? Didn't want to bias myself, so I ran another one. And sure enough, hardly any of it had been implemented.
Yep. Almost always the case.
I literally could have taken the one from 3 years earlier and just handed it back over and said, "Here, it's the same shit. Go fix it." But yeah, I was like, oh my God. I was like, you serious, guys? Like, what have you been doing for the last 3 years? All right,
Yeah.
well.
And that's another tactic I use to head off some of these things, right? So in this case, it's like, we're 3 or 4 years later and we want you to tell us if what we just did is up to what you asked for 4 years ago. And my first thing is, well, there's been about 40 algorithm updates since then, right? And in your particular business, some of these really matter. But and then I would poke around. I poke around. All I have to do is go to their website and poke around to start seeing if they even did half of 1 or 2 of the tasks I asked. And as soon as I see that they didn't, I say, yeah, if you want, you can pay me for a proper review because it looks like none of the work was done. Or you can just actually do your own internal testing and then come back to me.
Yeah, which actually, though, does bring up an interesting point, I guess, for business owners or marketing directors or whoever. Given the rate of change and that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years compared to the earlier days, like, how often should companies be reviewing things as far as an audit goes? Like, should they be getting a limited audit once a year just as per due diligence or whatever?
Oh, let me answer. It depends.
Oh, you used
Yes, exactly.
Woo!
It depends.
All right, we're done. Drop the mic. See you later, people. We're out of here.
That's true. No, Tammy's absolutely true. We all know that.
But we get more core algo updates and things of that nature. Or does that fall into the forensic side of things? Whereas once it gets broken, then call someone in to audit it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, which is probably the worst. You don't want to do that. So, like, how often should companies be considering at least a limited audit review?
It really does depend, right? So in one case, what is the business? What is their industry? What is their vulnerability to major changes in the Google environment for that industry or that market model? That's a critical factor. Another one is how much change takes place within that environment internally to their organization throughout the year. If they're constantly making dev changes, they need to be routinely monitoring their own stuff as they make those changes, where they could potentially correlate shifts in their traffic, shifts in their revenue from organic or other sources to work that was done internally, either in dev or in content or in other model changes, right? These are all factors that matter. And there is no one size fits all with that. And beyond that, just monitoring the tools that exist that are standard red flag tools, Google Search Console, Google Analytics with proper goal tracking and conversion tracking set up.
Which is a whole different
Right?
session. Whole different session. But
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. Bill, I know you're kind of an algo guy like me, so same kind of question. Like, as things keep evolving and changing, how often should a corporation, company, small business, whatever, be looking at this kind of stuff? Like,
I'm a big fan of a SWOT analysis, strength, opportunities,
Yeah.
weaknesses and threats. You know, have they changed the business in any way? Have they added new things? Do they have emerging technologies that they want to offer? These are the kind of things that could make a significant difference to the business and how well it's run and how much profits they make. Is there a worthwhile return on investment for doing the work, for making sure that they're doing the best they can with the website they have? Is it meeting the audience needs? We handle some reputation management issues too. And sometimes people dig themselves into pretty deep holes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Amazingly.
yeah.
That requires a little more monitoring.
I know there's so somebody in the chat was saying there's 1,000 years worth of experience in this room, plus Tammy's 30. Oh wow! Whoa. Well, I think that was Ammon, but
Yeah, it was Evan.
was it
Thank
Ammon?
you, whomever.
Yeah, it was Ammon, of course. But yeah, you should speak it like they should be talking, because there's like Chris Boggs, Casey Yandel, Ammon. There's like 1,000 years over in the chat right now as well. I guess someone here is actually, oh, and John Lejeune says hi. Hey, Tammy. I guess everyone's different on this one, but slightly related. Someone's curious about what payment methods you use because of these larger fees and so forth. I don't know, bank transfers. Like a lot of corporations, I don't know about you, Alan, but in my case, a lot of them, you know, I mean, they do their invoices every 30 or 60 or 15 or whatever, and yeah, I got to go through the accounting department and all that shit and set that all up. And so there's bank transfers. Smaller clients, obviously, PayPal or crap like that. But what do you do?
Yeah, no, I have a really strict policy. I don't play that game. I don't do net 30, 60, 90, or 600.
No, but I don't do anything till I get paid. Like, I don't even start the work. But I'm just saying, some corporates, I got to go through accounting, and then it's like, fine, as soon as the money hits the bank, I'll start doing the work. But you know, someone just asked a payment methods you accept is what they're saying.
Yeah.
Hey, can I just make one point on the how often to do an audit?
Yeah.
As someone who, at the end of my career, I mainly worked with clients and I was involved in the dev too. But part of the SEO I did was monthly checks of Webmaster Tools, Search Console, and I also did yearly
annual review.
More than a review. I would be looking at there again, seeing if there's any gap in content, because usually I was getting new keywords. That's how I like to expand, is to find new audiences using new keywords, which is a different webinar.
And I think like these guys were saying too, because I've had some lately that were B2C and now they're expanding into they were B2B and then now they're expanding into B2C. So that requires a whole different approach. And so yeah, I do agree with it. It depends. But.
And I would also say when I was doing local SEO, I did the NAP stuff about every 6 months.
Okay,
because that client was in a business that their telephone number and stuff was kind of all over the place.
So circling back to the payment thing, again, I think this person was asking actually what payment methods are you taking?
Yeah.
But as far as payments go, to the person to ask, I know you didn't ask this, but I'm with Alan. I don't do a damn thing till it's paid in full, because literally 10 years ago, 12, I don't know, whenever I started doing audits, instead of just normal SEO. I remember I was doing 50-50, right? 50 up front, 50 at the end. I sent them an audit that said, you need to restructure URLs, you need to do this, this, and that. The person said, I can't afford all that. I'm not paying you. I was like, well, no, you didn't pay me. You paid for the advice. You didn't say that, give me advice that I can afford. It was like, but they were like, well, I can't afford to have my dev team do all that. I'm not paying you. So no, I always get paid up front. But again, payment methods, it depends. Small people, maybe PayPal, larger corps, tends to be bank transfers. I don't know about the rest, Joe.
I'd always do bank transfers because it would go into my actual work account. That was just money from work because that really sorted out taxes for the bookkeeper. And it was easier. I didn't mind net 30. It didn't bother me, but that was once after I'd established a relationship. But I'm also one of the really strange ones that if I said, if I looked at your site and I found ways I could help, I was in anyway. I was in at that point. So I've been really, really lucky. Of course, I don't take clients anymore. And I haven't.
Yeah, I was going to say, you better not say that. You'll be
I don't take clients anymore. I'm gainfully, happily secure where I am.
Alan, I'm going to create a ghost account, and just every time I get a client now, send them over to Timmy. Just pretend I'm someone else, and I'll get twice as much service out of it. I like this.
We'll outsource to the soft-hearted one, but I don't mind. I didn't mind that. I think if you are building a freelance business or what have you, that you have your own separate account for this, it makes it so much easier when taxes come around. Truly, it does. And you get to really see, are you charging enough for your time, and evaluating every 6 months what your income is versus your output.
Alan, I was told to tell you from the chat on Facebook, on YouTube, that I'll tell you what they said in a second. I think they're looking for you because it was your brother asking. I think he's trying to figure out where you hid the money, bro. Your brother's name Hal, I believe, right? Yeah, Hal is trying to figure out where you put the money. That was his question. So I think Hal wants to know where the money's hidden. There you
go. So for me, I take wire transfer, ACH deposit, and credit card as my 3 options. And I do use PayPal. I'm a preferred PayPal merchant at this point with the amount that comes through my PayPal account. And I don't mind the fee that PayPal assesses. It's a business expense for me. It's a write-off because it's a bank fee.
Yeah, you build it in anyways.
And because I've had PayPal at the scale that I have for so long, I don't need to wait 2 or 3 days to transfer to my bank account. It's same day instant now. So
yeah, same here. Same here, depending on the time. If it comes in at 8 o'clock this morning, I can send it. It'll be here tonight. So
yeah, PayPal for me. Banks in Canada tend to think everybody in the U.S. is trying to rip us off. So they hold it for like a month and even longer.
A good reason. My most recent one that was with a corporation was about 3 days, I think.
Oh, really? Yeah. Your bank must like it, but not mine.
Yeah, I use primarily PayPal, but I have taken, I use PayPal Me. If they don't have a PayPal account, then they can hit it with a credit card. And but probably 90% of my billing is PayPal. The rest of it is ACH.
Yeah, most of my clients wanted to pay by credit card.
Jesus Christ. Lauren Baker's in the chat now. This is like senior's day at the casino.
Another good thing about PayPal is I do take, it's not because they're transferring through PayPal. Their corporate clients paying with an American Express card or a Visa or a MasterCard, and I just bill it through PayPal, and then in the blink of an eye, I got a $6,000 or an $8,000 or a $12,000 payment in PayPal.
Yeah.
Lauren, some guy named Lauren Baker said, and do not answer this. Speaking of the ability to implement, how closely do you work with the dev teams before signing the client? Go back and watch the beginning, Lauren. Okay. Obviously, you weren't here earlier.
We went into some detail on that.
45 minutes ago, bro. So you can just go back and check that out.
I'm on the dev team, Lauren.
or Lauren, if you're listening, if you don't want to have to go all the way back for the video, I'd be happy to talk with you. $400 an hour to consider.
I have an interesting one, I guess. For anyone who comes across this, in the future, as far as watching it and things of that nature, and obviously I cut these into little chunks. let's go to the other side of things. If mom and pop shop, a company, a corporation, whatever, is looking to hire someone to audit, what kind of things should they be looking for? What kind of questions should they ask? How do they decide if the person they're hiring is good at doing audits? I think that's a worthwhile thing.
It's simple. If they're not on this panel today, don't trust them.
There you go. There you go.
There you go. If you're watching this video, just hire one of us.
We're the only ones.
No self-promotion
Nobody else.
on this panel.
I think that's.
Or actually, maybe you should avoid us and go with anybody else you find.
Yeah, that might be. We're a little too cantankerous. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Tammy.
I think that's really. I think that's really imperative. But doesn't it really go down to if you're asking them questions and they can explain it very, very, very clearly in layman's terms? Like if we say, your UX has a lot of friction. If you can explain that in a very clear and precise way, then you know that they're not going to utilize a plug and play. Now, I'm not bagging on tools by any means. There's Screaming Frog. I mean, hello, we've part of our tool set.
Yeah, I always say it's cart before the horse syndrome. You know what I mean? Know what you need before you figure out where to get the data. So.
100%. If you can walk through, if they can walk through on a video chat on your website and pick out 6 things right away, good. They know what they're looking for. The tool is just going to reinforce what we're already looking at. We can already see some things. And of course, once you hire them, they're going to find so much more. But if somebody supplies you with a free website audit and then wants to follow up and walk you through it, run.
Yeah.
Do not cut them a check and find an expert.
Punch them in the throat, then run.
Just to say, I used to do that to get a dev job. Sure. Okay, I used to give my SEO away with my development because I don't know how to develop without doing SEO. It's like, to me, part of their job. That's why I think webmasters should learn these things.
Well, yeah, but as opposed to a recent Google video that kind of implied that you should ask for a free audit in order to get past the interviewing process. No. Yeah, it could be part of your job, but it shouldn't be part of your job interview.
Well, we've all gotten those cold calls, right? That were like, hey, I just ran an audit on your website and you need to fix these 3 things. It's like, get off my website and get out of my email.
No,
right now.
no.
There's a difference too.
Block.
It's very difficult in our industry to be able to have a simple standard set of questions to ask or evaluation criteria when trying to find somebody to help you solve problems that could be so wide ranging. At the same time, though, unfortunately, there's a lot of people in our industry, a lot of agencies in our industry who use the word audit when it's really just a high-level review and it's not a true audit.
Exactly.
Or a lot of site owners who hear review and somehow they think it's an audit, even though they weren't told it's an audit. Right? There's all of these challenges that people go through, and it does make it very difficult. So asking serious questions about your situation and what they think it might need to have happen for them to be able to help you, right? And paying attention to, are they saying they're going to do an audit? If they're saying they're going to be doing an audit and you have a 50-page website or a 15-page website and that audit's going to cost $500 or $1,500, that's reasonable. The moment you get into thousands of pages and millions of visits a month, that $500 audit or $1,000 review might be able to help you, and it's less likely to the bigger we scale it up, either in volume of content and pages and sections to a site, or in the scale of the user volume that it needs to interact with that, because the larger the volume of visitors, the broader the need is within that site's environment. And while I don't like to say, you know what, you pay what you get for, because you don't always pay what you get for. Sometimes you get more value and sometimes you get less. That's
especially if you're hiring Tammy.
And I do think this needs to be said. There are some sites that offer free audits. You go to their site and they'll run a test and they'll spit out results for you. And that is an instance where you get what you pay for. The value of what you've paid for, what you've gotten, isn't much. It's really generic. It's if you're trying to find somebody who's going to help you and explain to you what they're doing, why they're doing it, I think it's part of the value. You want to have the person willing to take the time with you and to explain why they're doing the things they're doing and how it's going to help you. And they should be able to take the time to do that, to explain that stuff to you. If they can't, you need to talk to somebody else.
But discovering those people becomes the trick. So I would think, you know, networking, because, you know, Bill, I get almost all of my work is referral, meaning like either a past client or someone in the industry or something like that. So I think for a business owner, if I had advice, you know, network other people in the industry, talk to other people, and then ask, have you, you know, had any experience with someone that you could refer? I think, you know, unfortunately, searching Google or whatever, or some Facebook ad probably isn't going to get you there, you know?
If somebody's willing to share case studies with you or past experiences or refer some provide information about people they've worked with before, and you can get references, that has value.
Yeah, but how many of us have ever received a prospect coming to us and wanted to see if they could, you know, you can redact the name, but I'd like to see one of your sample audits. No, I'm sorry. You know, this is not the fishing pier. Go elsewhere. You know.
Right, but that's not what I'm saying.
No, I understand, Bill. I'm just it pinged me because I just recently got another one of those. They wanted to see one of my previous audits so they knew what to expect. I said, well, send me $5,000 and you'll know exactly what to expect.
I'm telling you, I've almost hired Alan just so I could see the audit. Not kidding. No shame. No shame.
It would be worth the investment. He does a heck of a job.
I know.
Tammy, this is just between you. Everybody else, close your ears. Everybody watching, close your ears. Tammy, this is just between you and I. Send me an email later on. I'll send you a few different audits from different industries I've worked in.
Okay.
They just won't be NDA related because I can't.
Okay. Oh my God. Is it Christmas?
Yeah.
It's Christmas up in here.
Well, it is. That's why Bill's working on that beard for you. We got to stress him out so it's white by December.
And I'm only doing that for Tammy because she's no longer doing audits out in the world with clients. She's in-house.
I'm completely 100% in-house.
However, for $300,
I've worked with you, so I've got copies of yours. I'm still doing it my way. Still doing
to all of you who had your ears closed earlier, for $300, I'll send you a copy of one of Alan's audits.
The good news is, Dave, if you haven't seen one of my audits in the last year, you don't know what I do these days. My audits used to be 40 pages average. They're now 60 pages average.
No, I think it was last summer or whatever, last time we were on something together.
Yeah, all right. So it's close to what I do these days. Close.
Yeah. I still, like I said, that the meeting was more fun, you know. It was just classic. Oh my gosh.
I think if you go to Google and put audit expert in there, you might get a few clues. Look for how many times they're there and where they've written. That's a good way to tell. If the only audits the only place they've talked about audits is on their website, likely not a good candidate.
All right.
SEO audit expert is the phrase?
Yeah.
Who comes up? Who's Googling?
Neil Patel. Oh my God, run the fuck away.
Good or bad?
Oh, he went to the dark side right there.
I didn't really do it. I'm just know that when I was doing SEO stuff, that's how I see
got like 12 minutes left here, so let's see. I threw up for questions. Bill Hunt would like to know template international sites, full audit of every country version or just unique items for the local version. What is the process you suggest?
Each
We've done that, haven't we, Dave?
one.
Yeah, but if every country means other languages, that becomes difficult. But yeah, you and I have done States, Canada, UK versions. So
I do
in those
international.
situations,
I do international with ours, and I found that each individual subdirectory is going to have broken links, orphan pages from its own. You've got to treat them as revenue generation, as they all have their own targets and experiences. But I am in the class of the more you
and
know.
so would the same Tammy, same advice would go for subdomains.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How can you know if you don't look?
Where it gets really dangerous, if you assume and don't look, that's when it gets really dangerous. So one example, I have a client, they have their main site is US focused, and then they have a UK branch. And it turns out that the main site is built on one platform and framework, and the UK is on a completely different platform and framework. And the content is organized completely differently. And if you don't look, you're not going to know that.
And that's what we saw, right, Terry, with the UK. Like the States and Canada versions were fairly close, but if I remember the one you and I worked on, the UK one was a completely different animal too.
Yeah, we were also seeing US results ranking higher than Canadian results, and that was because of internal linking
Oh,
on the home site.
oh, it was a clusterfuck, Alan. And then they had like 300 satellite sites, essentially dealers, right? They had another
Each
300.
dealer had a site.
Oh, and nobody had really figured out the internal linking structure of this network of sites, and so it was just horrendous. Like Terry was saying, you had the .com ranking over in Canada and eating a lunch at the .ca. It was, oh,
Yeah.
that was so much, yeah, a joy. All right, well, did we cover everything in the business of audits at least? Next week, folks, those who don't know, there'll be another session on Wednesday, 2:00. That'll be the nuts and bolts. So we're going to get into more of the nuts and bolts of audits. But anyone else got anything else they'd like to advise as far as the business side of audits and what have you?
I just have a piece of advice for anybody that's listening and will be. When Google updates, do not panic. Stop with the emails. It might not even affect you. It's been happening for 20 minutes.
Knee-jerk
Let it go.
reactions. Knee-jerk reactions. That gets into the forensic stuff, eh, Alan? So
Yeah.
yeah, that is the worst.
Yeah.
I would like to throw this one out here. This might take longer than we have, but another thing I often do is try to tell them to implement fixes one at a time, because what can happen, I've found, is something you may change could have a negative effect, something you change could have a positive effect, and so you have a net zero. So you can't see if what you did works. So I often, like, let's say they're working internal linking structures, then I'll say, let's do that and let that percolate for 7 to 10 days and then move on to the next thing, which could be speed or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't like them to try and do all the fixes in one big bundle, because that can often,
Well, even two fixes at once. If you're troubleshooting your garden or your car or your website, if you do more than one thing at a time and something happens, good or bad, you don't know which thing caused it.
right.
And that's just going to make our job harder when you call us and want us to figure out what went wrong.
I ask clients to put stuff that the devs do in the
Work log.
analytics
Work log and
and
then
have a
annotate it.
change log
Yes.
timeline in the
Right.
analytics as well.
Annotations.
Whenever you make a change,
Yeah,
that makes
yeah.
it really
Yeah,
easy to track it,
that's-
folks.
It
That's a
does
big
help
one.
a
That's a
lot.
big one, folks. So what Terry's saying is, I always do this, is you tell them to make sure that the devs or whoever's, changing title tags or whatever the hell's going on, to constantly keep a work log, give it a number like, 134 or whatever. And then when we start implementing it, annotate your analytics with, work log 361 and keep those there. So if anything happens along the way, as we know with forensic stuff, which is another discussion, at least you can backtrack and figure out what the hell happened. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one other thing I want to make sure that gets emphasized, because this might have been glossed over earlier on. Yes, it's important to use tools to automatically test a whole range of things related to SEO. No, that's not a true audit unless it's specifically billed only as a technical audit, because a true complete audit involves human understanding, usability that can only be evaluated with eyeballs, because the search engines can only go so far in their algorithmic attempt to emulate visual, intellectual, and emotional experience. So if you're going to say you do full audits, you need to have the understanding, experience, and willingness to not just use technical tools to figure it all out. It's so important.
I would agree.
Well said.
I call it, there's 5 actual audits. SEO technical, link audit, social audit,
Content. Content.
Forensic.
content audit, which is one of the most important. But there's 5 of them, and they all play a big role in SEO.
And they all have major differences. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they all work together.
And whatever you offer, just be clear in your communication about what it is you're offering and what you're not.
Yep.
And sorry, I just had to put this in there. Paul Lavelle, that's for you. Oh, sorry,
Okay.
no. In the Facebook, sorry, in the YouTube comments, he said there's a guy on Facebook that sells audit templates, and we all know who that is.
Well, actually, that guy is probably on Fiverr.
Yeah, well, no, he's
He
talking
got
about.
the template on Fiverr. What do you mean?
We're talking about the guy who studied under Josh Brzezinski. How's that?
Oh, that guy.
There we go. There you
I
go.
shudder to think.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Paul. Love you too. I had to be one troll in the bunch, you know.
Yeah, what Dave said, Paul.
Anyways, final words, I guess. What are we at here? Yeah, we got 5 minutes. Bill, any final words, sir? See, I could learn from Bill. He thinks before he talks. Wow. I really got to learn how to do it. Do you sell a course on that, Bill? Because I'll take it.
That's an old art there.
We need a timer for
So,
timeout.
so one of my favorite features on most audits we do is an executive summary part, so that it can be read quickly by people who don't want to read all 80 or 90 pages.
Right.
And it gives them links to pages where they might want more details on things you've pointed out. And having that ability to offer prioritized charts that show how long it might take to do something, how important it is also things people look for and they want to see.
Do you prioritize stuff? Like I always do, like, 3 levels, like short-term stuff to work on, midterm and long-term stuff, as based upon priority, importance, and amount of work it would be.
And what type of thing it affects on site. Does it affect crawlability? Does it affect usability? Point those things out and let them know. Give them a sense of why you're recommending the things you are. And make it easier for them to understand. Yeah.
Tammy, any final thoughts?
No, I completely agree. You need to prioritize and space it out. I do an executive, I used to be fair. I used to do an executive summary, definitely. That went to the C-suite who just wanted to look and see, hey, how are we doing? But, and then the full 80, 90 page audit as it were. And at the very end, I actually do actionable technical steps that they can hand out to their individual teams.
Yeah, I do it in like spreadsheets that they can hand to the devs or whoever.
Right.
And then put a
Give these
date
to
and
devs,
knock it
give
off.
these to your content. And so people, every single person that was touching it felt empowered to come to me and ask questions, and also felt empowered with the knowledge they were gaining from it. That's how I would break them down.
And
Right.
no disrespect to Ellen, but pages, number of pages, I would maybe have, if I was really pushing it, 20 word pages. But I know SEO that you know too, he has 40-page audits that aren't worth the paper they're printed on. We all know who he is. Don't measure by the quantity.
Size. It's not size that matters, is
Yeah,
what you're saying,
it's
Terry.
just like with men, Dave.
Size doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Oh
no,
boy, here
yeah,
we go.
and I totally agree, right? And some people say they have 200-page audits, but it turns out 180 pages are just data that I include in a separate spreadsheet.
Right.
Right.
I keep all my data in spreadsheets in a folder called data, and then in my audit says refer to this spreadsheet. Right.
Well, that
Yeah.
should be how it's set up anyhow, because they should have actionable items from a, that's why for me, Screaming Frog was a big part of it, because it gives you the ability to just export the errors into files that they can hand to the dev, and that dev can work with them.
Final
Right.
words, Doc.
Saying.
Final words, Doc.
Actually, you brought it up in your final comment. I was talking about getting ready to talk about the same thing. So no, other than be careful out there about who you hire.
And Alan, see, I left you last because I know you're going to go on for a while. Any final thoughts, Alan?
We're already covered it.
You've got him confused with Dan Thies.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I guess you'll have one-man show. And Terry, I guess, anything from you before we go?
Not really, other than if in the way of this, I would say if I was a web developer, I would learn how to do a site audit. I would recommend it for them
All right, well, there we
as
go.
time well spent.
Well, again, I'd like to thank everyone. It was an hour and a half, and I'm sure we could have sat here all day. 24 hours of SEO audit talk for charity. God, we'd probably do this. Oh, yeah, easily. Anyways, everyone, thank you very much for coming out. And in the comments, all you old bastards that decided to show up, thanks for showing up. God. Like you know, where's the young people trying to learn from us? No, it's just all our trolls in there.
Just old guys taking cheap shots.
Just the old guys that know.
They
the
all
old
came by.
guys.
It was like, oh, I get the troll. All these guys in one place. I'm showing up. You know. So. Anyways, all right, guys. Thank you very much. Everyone watching, thank you, and see you next time. Next Wednesday, for anyone watching, we're gonna have another session with some other people. And till then, have yourselves a great week, and thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank
Will
you.
Pearl next.
Bye all.